You're listening to the Third Watch News Alert. Over the last couple of days, especially since early October, there have been some experiences in this that I need to personally share about the drip of the news that came out on these sexual abuse cases. And in fact, which is so bothersome, is about how helpless we have felt going through this, and the drip, how this stuff would just gradually come out little stories here and there. And the more contrast we draw to this topic, the more you articulate what happened. And we're talking over 40 years of sexual abuse that just drip. In January 2010, there was a little girl who was a 10-month-old who was raped by her mother's boyfriend. And if you're not familiar with the story, you need to look it up, and I'll try to find the blog or the news post. I try to get as many news posts together so they can draw clarity to why, if something goes unchecked long enough, this is why there's checks and balances in our government system. And you just heard, like, not even less than a year ago, maybe 6 months ago, about Governor Rendell involved in an investigation where there was sexual abuse going on with children. And why is it that it's happening and it's so out there? It's like right in your face. And then you have a mainstream news that either turns a blind eye, or in the case of listening to The View, how one of the hosts was saying, well, this will deter kids from go to Hollywood. And, like, to me, that's the wrong way to look at this. This is, to me, when somebody says, well, it's going to deter people from going out and modeling and things like that. No, what it does is it draws attention to a problem so it can correct itself. And people who actively are outspoken are drawing clarity to something that will change the way movies are done, including now you can tell that Christian movies are getting more airtime because of exactly that reason. They don't want to send their kids to movies that are now, to me, not just questionable, but even bothersome. Like, when I started reading up on the book series, this was a random thing about Sophia, the movie. The character in the book. It's a series that I'm pretty sure that anybody's read the book Sophia, and you notice that there's witchcraft in it, and then there's all this other stuff. And the more I started reading and studying on the internet about the Sophia series that you can find on the bookshelves in Barnes and Noble, etc., the more I started reading about it, the more I recognized, I'm like, well, oh my gosh, you don't even know who the author is of this book. I couldn't even find an author on the IMB profile channel, like where you can find celebrities and authors who write books. And that's when I started, and at this point, it was just a random thing. And before you knew it, I started reading more about the books and the authors of the books. And you can draw a contrast to authors. You can draw a contrast to a lot of things. Like, to me, I do graphics. If you haven't already noticed, I do a lot of cut and paste and graphics of my own. And I started We Are Family Therapy Radio because I personally think that there's a place here in Pittsburgh, in this region, just like you see in reviews and on Word FM and Bot Radio, that there's a place for us to have a platform to talk about the authors, the type of books out there, and not only that, but find out about the GG series, because the GG series to me is Christian-based, it's faith-based, and it's safe. And I stopped buying a lot of the videos. Now, a lot of people were extremely offended by what I put on my Facebook page, but I just blatantly put it out there. But we started finding images of and Walt Disney characters of what look like hand jobs. And then you can draw the correlation to the child sexual abuse. So apparently this was offensive material that a lot of people did not like what we were putting out there. But what we're trying to do is show you it's so in your face. And fortunately, it's not just me. There are other channels on YouTube and Facebook that are outspoken, including, I mean, there's a list of, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I mean, I can put all kinds of posts in the link below. I'm just talking freely of, I'm sharing my heart because I know that we've been through something. We've been through some sexual abuse of our own. So to me, it's so hard to put the words to kind of offense when somebody violates somebody and hurts somebody and does something that is crosses not just boundaries. We're talking about immoral, and when I as I recover from some of my old injuries, like to me, it's hard to put words to the abuse issues that we've been through. So it takes some time. Like what I learned at Family Resources, like, I mean, I went to group and I know like enough about recovery, but to me, it kind of gets murky. We kind of go into this murky area. Like I was a teenager when we went to group. And now that I'm in my 40s, it's like a lot of times, and it's very true, this is what our therapist told me, is that a lot of times this stuff doesn't surface until you're like in your 40s. And a lot of the stuff that happened to me in my mid 20s started to surface like couple months ago. So a lot of times abuse, even though it goes underreported or not reported at all, doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just, the way laws are, you can't report something until, well, you have to report it within 24 hours. And a lot of times it's really sketchy. Like to me, I reported an assault not even 24 hours afterwards, and they still, the courts don't, they have to pick and choose what cases they're going to take. And in fact, I read a report about this, and this was like 2 years ago, about how some of these cases would not just didn't go reported or didn't go through the legal process, more or less. It's because they do look at the precedents and depending on the case and depending on the circumstances. I think it's got to the point now, though, a lot of people are using this as propaganda, and that's where I'm upset. I've been upset about this for about 2 years because I slowly saw this drip, 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 and that takes away from what individual victims have gone through. And it's hard to be outspoken about something like this because it gets into that tricky area where privacy and violation issues come up. But to me, not talking about it is also detrimental in a lot of ways. So this allows us to have a platform here, and our hashtag Project 3 Recovery. There's all types of recovery going on, but it's all rooted in child abuse, neglect, abandonment, and survivor issues. So, working towards the peer specialist and working with others, hopefully not just outspoken, but just trying to draw clarity and going to counseling and going to therapy is the emphasis in what we're trying to do. And obviously, and what I mean by this is that we're in recovery. When I say recovery, where some of us are coming out of surgery, some of us had long-term injuries that went undealt with, and me personally, I know they say that there's a difference. To me, it's the legislation here in the state of Pennsylvania on HB 951 about the statute of limitations for rape victims and sexual abuse victims. And we're talking about child abuse victims who have had a case. In our case, we had a case in Allegheny County because we were placed in foster care, and there was stuff going on in our foster home, and there was stuff going on with placement issues. So that's kind of where our topic has been for a while. It's just kind of at a standstill. But when I tell you that the placement issues come up, not because it just came up, because there was recent assaults, and this was reported. Now, as far as like dealing with the police, and because there were surgical issues at the time, I couldn't pursue it What I'm saying is that because HB 951 sat in window legislation for as long as it did, it's probably only going to get momentum if really actively, well, let me just say, individuals actively go to Harrisburg and have a victim's impact statement and address the House floor on this, and also the Senate and the State House about like the case in when we're talking about Jerry Sandusky, and we talk about the case in LYFS at Lutheran Home and Glade Run. That's the only way, and we have to like raise money to do it. We would have to get tour buses, and everyone would naturally have to set a date, and we would have to definitely get out there and do this. So um, it's a lot of work. It would mean, fundraising, making subways and sandwiches, and as you know, the whole story of Jared, the subway pedo. I mean, it just goes right with whatever everything else that's going on. So, um, the idea is to get people together and go to Harrisburg, though. That's the whole point. And I know the slow drip that came out. It was just little by little by little, and over time, what it does is it gives families, it gives you, me, those people out there who've been victims of abuse an opportunity to have a voice. And because PVAC, if you look up at the website, PVAC is one of the representatives for the Jerry Sandusky victims. I talked to their office, and they're very much willing to help. So it's really you making a phone call, calling the switchboard at Harrisburg, addressing your representatives in your district. It is election year, so we're coming into the next couple weeks before election, find out more about the people that are running for office and what their decision is, and ask specifically about HB 951. There's your barometer. Your canary in the coal mine is finding out what they're going to do to have stricter, tougher legislation and enforcement on child sexual abuse offenders, especially repeat sex offenders, especially because it's not the first time offenders as much as it's the repeat sex offenders. Because I can draw clarity on case after case, and the repeat sex offenders are the ones, and we're talking about the ones right now where victims feel helpless, like they cannot turn to anybody. You can turn to us, at least this way. If there's some way that we can get a network together who will be willing to house or help families, even if it's temporary, as long as we have crime assistance and they have a claim number, that there's a way to shelter and help those in need. That's really what family advocacy is, or at least start an office where we can at least be an interim. That's why I'm looking at Save the Pen Theater, and I've written letters to Miller's Quality Meat, who put a display together in memory of Missy Bardo. Missy Bardo was a victim. Also, she was a member. I'm sorry, not a member. She was an employee at Miller's Quality Meat, and she had died last year. So maybe somehow, with the support of other local businesses here, we can not only just save the Penn Theater, but we can create a vape lounge or a place for families to go temporarily while, like, especially in the middle of the day when a lot of families are, like, especially as the weather gets colder, and just somewhere warm to go. Maybe an overnight cot. A lot of times in these shelters, especially the cold weather shelters, there's usually, and they fill up pretty quickly. So um, getting cots together, having blankets, having just a place for some families and someone to go, just hang out and have coffee. We might not be able to have an overnight shelter, but we can definitely maybe provide a drop-in center or something at the theater where families are in crisis or just need someone to talk to, an on-call counselor, security, those kind of things to me, and a caseworker, a therapist, and detectives that can work with families, especially because it's out of the greater Pittsburgh area and we're more up here in Butler County. It'll give kind of that in between where, it can get further away from maybe some of the stuff that's going on. But all these ideas are great. It's really going to take somebody with really the ability to write a check and help us, we can flip this and we can make this happen even before Christmas. And the object is to do it quickly. Let's get this together. Let's make sure that we have somewhere where we can go, where we can talk to families about some of the issues we're dealing with right now. Because I don't think we have. I really think at this point this is where it's at. So go to help me by going to hashtag Project 3 Recovery, and I'll